My name is Marcus, and I've been delivering pizza for 3 years in Portland. The night I'm about to tell you about happened last December. A cold, rainy night whose details I haven't forgotten to this day. It was nearing 11 o'clock when I received an order for 13 Maple Street. I didn't know that street well. It's in an old neighborhood on the outskirts of town. A poorly lit area dotted with abandoned wooden houses. Sally, the restaurant manager, told me that address placed sporadic orders, always late at night, and the customer always tipped well. I set off with rain hammering heavily against my windshield. As I got closer to the neighborhood, I noticed the streetlights growing sparser and the darkness thickening. The houses seemed silent, their windows shut tight, no life showing behind them. I arrived on Maple Street. The houses were clearly numbered, but the numbers were worn, 10, 11, 12. Then my car stopped in front of number 13. It was an old 2-story wooden house, its grey paint peeling, its front yard full of dry weeds. What really caught my attention was that all the house's windows were lit. Every window in every room on both floors glowed with a dim yellow light. At that time of night, it seemed strange but not frightening. I climbed the creaky wooden steps and knocked on the door. I waited. Nothing. The app instructed the customer to call me upon arrival. I called. The phone rang twice, then a whispering female voice answered. "I'm upstairs, the door is open, come in." I froze. Company policy was clear. Never enter customers' homes. But the woman's voice sounded tired. Perhaps she was sick or elderly and couldn't come down. I told myself I would just step inside, set the pizza down, and leave. I pushed the door gently and it swung open easily. I entered a foyer lit by dim light. The house was warm and smelled of old wood. "I'm here with your order," I called out. No answer. I placed the pizza on a small table in the foyer and turned to leave. At that moment, I heard a sound coming from upstairs. It wasn't clear speech, more like a continuous murmur, followed by soft tapping on the wooden floor above my head. "Mom, are you okay?" I asked, moving toward the stairs. My foot stopped on the first step. The air suddenly grew heavier. The lights upstairs began going out one by one. Tap, tap, tap. The sound above me grew faster, like something was moving across the floor of the room directly above me, following my footsteps. I slowly backed towards the door, my eyes fixed on the foyer ceiling. The sound above me stopped abruptly. Then I heard a door open upstairs and soft footsteps descending the stairs. I was about to scream, but then I saw her. A middle-aged woman in a faded nightgown coming down slowly, carrying an extinguished candle. She smiled faintly at me. "Thank you. I'm sorry I made you come up. My legs are hurting tonight." I felt relieved. My imagination was playing tricks on me. I gave her the bill, and she tipped me well as expected. I thanked her and left. I returned to my car and opened the door. Before getting in, I glanced back at the house one last time. All its windows were dark now, every single one. Not a single light remained, as if someone had extinguished them all at once. A chill ran down my spine. How had she turned off all those lights so quickly, and why? That night, when I returned to the restaurant, I asked Sally about the customer at 13 Maple Street. She looked at me strangely and said, "Customer? No one's ordered from there in months. The last order was last summer. An old woman who lived there. She died a few weeks later. A candle fire that fell in her upstairs bedroom." I never told anyone what happened after that. But whenever I pass by Maple Street, I speed up my car and never look toward number 13. And on some rainy nights, I receive a notification for an order from that address. I never accept it, but the notification keeps appearing minute after minute until I turn off my phone. My name is David, and I work for a parcel delivery company in the English countryside. Harlow woods are dense and ancient, stretching for miles of old-growth trees and narrow paths covered in moss. Last November, I received a delivery assignment to an address deep in the woods. My manager warned me. "Strange address, but the customer paid a premium for express delivery. Just leave the box at the gate and come straight back." The package was a small wooden crate, about 2 feet long, bound with thick rope. It was suspiciously light, as if empty. Written on it in neat handwriting, "Fragile contents, do not shake." I set off in the afternoon. The sun hung low in the pale November sky. The navigation system led me through winding country roads until the asphalt disappeared entirely, replaced by a narrow dirt path flanked on both sides by towering trees. After 3 miles, the system announced I had arrived, but there was no house, not even a cottage, just an old iron gate, half open, topped with a moss-covered stone arch, and a path fading into the trees behind it. I stepped out of the van carrying the crate. The air was cold and damp, thick with the smell of decaying leaves. I pushed the gate, and it screeched loudly. I walked a few steps down the path beyond it, intending only to place the box somewhere visible and leave as ordered. But after about 50 yards, I saw something among the trees. A small stone house, more like an old hunter's lodge. Its windows were dark, its chimney cold, but the door was slightly ajar. The path led straight to it. I figured it was better to knock. Maybe the customer was there waiting for the package. I approached slowly. Dry leaves crunched under my feet. I knocked 3 times on the heavy wooden door. The door slowly opened on its own. I peered inside and saw a single, completely empty room. Dusty wooden floor, a cold fireplace in the corner, and nothing else. No furniture, no curtains, no sign of life. I set the crate down on the floor in front of the fireplace and turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A scratching sound coming from inside the crate. I froze. I stared at the small wooden box wrapped in rope. The sound stopped. I waited. Nothing. Maybe it was the sound of branches outside the cottage, or the old floor settling under my feet. I reached out to lift the crate and place it somewhere better, but I pulled my hand back quickly when I felt something move inside it. Something alive. I felt a faint pulse travel through the wood to my fingertips. Damn it, what was in this box? I took a step back. Then something happened that stopped my heart. From a small gap in the corner of the crate, a finger emerged. A human finger, long and slender, a pale grayish color. It moved slowly, feeling the air, searching for something. Then another finger emerged, then another. An entire hand began crawling out of the narrow opening, bending at impossible angles. I screamed and bolted out of the cottage. I ran down the muddy path toward the iron gate. Behind me, I heard the cottage door slam open with force, then the sound of footsteps. Not normal human footsteps, more like wood striking the ground rapidly. Click, 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 like very long fingers running across hard ground. I reached the van and slammed the door shut. I turned the key and the engine roared. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the path behind me empty. But the iron gate, the one that had been half open, was now completely shut, and a heavy chain was wrapped around its bars. How had it closed? Who closed it? I didn't wait to find out. I drove at full speed down the dirt path, the van shuddering violently. I didn't stop until I reached the main paved road, and even then I didn't slow down. When I got back to the distribution center, the manager had already left. I parked the van and went home without speaking to anyone. In the morning, I got a call from the company. They asked about the package. What package? I asked. The delivery to Harlow Wood. The customer says he never received it. There was no package, I said, straining to keep my voice steady. I canceled the trip. I felt sick. A brief silence on the line. Then the manager said, "Strange, because the customer says he saw you leave the package at the property gate, and he says there was something else that got out of the van after you. He doesn't know what it was, but he says it went into the woods. I never went to Harlow Wood again, but some nights when I'm in bed about to fall asleep, I hear a sound outside my window. Click, 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 like fingers tapping on the glass. I never look. I pull the covers over my head and wait for the sound to fade with the coming of dawn." My name is Lena, and I used to deliver groceries in the suburbs of Denver. On the 3rd night of December, I started my shift as usual at 5 in the evening. The weather was cold, but the sky was clear, and a full moon lit the frost-covered streets. It was a quiet night until I reached my final order. The order consisted of a single box, A carton of milk, a loaf of bread, and a small container labeled salt in handwriting. Nothing else. The address was in an abandoned industrial zone on the outskirts of town, a place I knew well because I sometimes passed through it on my way home. But what caught my attention was a small detail in the instructions. Stop number 27. Pull over and turn off the engine. Do not get out. I will come to you. Stop number 27. What did that mean? At first I thought it was a mistake, but the navigation system led me to a narrow road between derelict warehouses, ending at an old rusty sign with faded lettering. Bus stop 27. I pulled over beside the sign. There was no sidewalk, no passenger shelter, nothing to suggest this was a real bus stop. Just a solitary sign on the edge of a dirt road surrounded by piles of scrap metal and dark concrete buildings. I turned off the engine as instructed. I waited. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15 minutes. I took out my phone to call the customer. No signal. Strange. I thought coverage was good here. I looked around. The moon cast a cold silver light over the desolate scene. The wind rustled the dry weeds growing through cracks in the broken asphalt. Otherwise, the scene was perfectly still. Then I heard it. A rustling sound coming from behind my car. I looked in the side mirror and saw a shadow moving among the scrap piles. It was tall and thin, moving slowly but with a strange fluidity. Not like a person walking, it was closer to gliding. I froze in my seat. The instructions said not to get out of the car, but the shadow was approaching. A tap on the rear window, a single soft knock. I slowly turned my head. Someone was standing behind my car. A very tall man, unnaturally slender, wearing a long black coat that reached the ground. His face was pale as the moon, his eyes sunken deep in their sockets. But what made my breath stop was his smile. It was too wide, impossibly wide, as if the corners of his mouth were slit all the way to his ears. I rolled down the window slightly, just a few centimeters. "Your order," I said, my voice trembling. I held up the box of milk, bread, and salt for him to see. He extended his hand. It was long, his fingers slender as spider legs. He took the box, but he didn't leave. He just stood there, looking at me with that wide smile. Do you want to pay?" I asked. He laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was a faint sound like dry leaves rustling. "I already paid," he said in a whispery voice like the wind. "A long time ago. I paid a great price." Then he lifted the small container of salt. He opened it slowly. He tilted it slightly, letting salt stream onto the ground in front of my car, forming a straight line on the asphalt, a thin white line gleaming under the moonlight. "For your protection," he said, "never cross this line tonight or any other night." Then he turned and began walking away. I watched him in the side mirror as he faded among the scrap piles. Before he disappeared completely, he stopped. He turned and looked directly into the mirror, directly into my eyes. "And don't look back as you leave." I started the engine, my hands trembling. I drove away slowly at first, then faster. When I reached the first lit traffic light at the entrance to the residential neighborhood, I stopped to catch my breath. My heart was pounding violently. I looked in the mirror one last time. The road behind me was empty, but on the asphalt, where the white line of salt had been, I now saw something else. Marks. Black scorch marks on the ground, as if something had tried to cross the line and burned. I went home that night trembling. I told no one. But the next day, I asked my coworker Jake, who sometimes worked in the industrial zone, about stop number 27. He looked at me strangely. "That bus stop? Haven't you heard the story?" "What story?" "About 30 years ago, there was a man who waited for the bus at that stop every night. He worked as a night guard at one of the warehouses. One night the bus never came, and at dawn they found him dead on the pavement, frozen to death. They say he died waiting, and ever since, on some moonlit nights, drivers see a tall man in a black coat standing by the sign, waiting." Jake paused, then added, "But the strangest part of the story, they found a bottle of salt in his pocket, full, No one knows why he was carrying it. I no longer work night delivery after that. I requested a transfer to the morning shift. But on some nights when I drive near the industrial zone, I see in the moonlight a thin white line on the old asphalt, a line that neither rain nor time has erased. And sometimes far behind it, a tall shadow standing beside a rusty sign, waiting for a bus that never comes. And whenever I see him, I remember that wide smile and those whispered words, "Don't look back."